Some towns demand coins. Ashbarrow demands hours in the furnace and a brand you can't wash off. Elias Ward and Tom rode in at dusk, and before their horses could cool, a bell slammed once, low, brutal, like the town was locking its jaws. Tom saw it first. A man on his knees by the road, wrists chained to a post. A crescent brand burned fresh into his forearm. The man shook so hard his teeth clicked. Beside him, a white-scarfed foreman smiled and held up a brass coin with a perfect crescent-bit missing, like it was a receipt. "Names," the foreman said, voice soft. "Or labor. Either way, you pay." Then his men stepped behind Elias, quiet as smoke, and pressed something hot into the small of the gravedigger's back. Not a gun, a glowing iron tip that hissed close enough to singe cloth. Tom's hand went for his rifle. The foreman's smile didn't move. "Easy," he warned. "I don't want the old man." His eyes slid to Tom. "I want the young one." Elias didn't turn. He didn't flinch. He only spoke like a grave being opened. "Move that iron," he said, calm and cold, "or I'll bury this town's fire." And as the bell rang a second time, Ashbarrow's gates began to close, slowly, like the West itself decided they weren't leaving. The foreman eased the hot iron away, as if he were choosing kindness. He stepped into the lantern light and gave a small bow like a man greeting guests to his home. "Holt Varrow," he said. "Foundry Foreman. I keep the fires fed and the town breathing." His scarf stayed too clean for a town that lived on soot. Tom's jaw clenched. "We're passing through." Varrow smiled wider. "So is everybody," he replied. "Then they stay." Elias's eyes swept the street. Men stood in doorways holding tools that weren't tools. Hooks, chains, hammers. A few carried rifles low, not proud, not official, just ready. Above them, catwalks crossed between buildings like spiderwebs, and a silhouette with a long rifle watched the entrance without moving. Elias's voice stayed even. "Who owns this town?" Varrow's smile didn't break. "The furnace does," he said. "The furnace eats. We feed it." His eyes slid to Tom. "And it's hungry." The chained man by the post whimpered. Varrow crouched, gentle as a preacher, and lifted the man's branded arm for Elias and Tom to see. The crescent mark glistened raw. "Labor paid," Varrow murmured. "Account closed." Tom's stomach tightened. "You're branding people." Varrow looked offended, like Tom had insulted church. "We're saving them," he said. "In Ashbarrow, nobody starves. Nobody freezes. Nobody gets robbed by passing wolves." He stood and dusted his hands. "But everyone contributes." Elias stared at the brand, then at Varrow. "And if they don't?" Varrow's gaze flicked to the tall chimneys, bleeding red smoke. "Then they go where the town keeps its problems," he said softly. "Down where the heat can't be argued with." Tom felt Elias shift beside him, the smallest movement, like a knife sliding back into a sheath. Elias didn't fear the words. He feared what they meant. Varrow nodded toward a boarding house with a lit window. "Warm bed," he offered. "Warm food." His eyes returned to Tom. "Morning registration? It's easier when you're rested." Elias's voice was flat. "We don't register." Varrow's smile held. "Everyone does," he replied. "Some with ink, some with fire." They walked into Ashbarrow with eyes on their backs. The heat from the foundry rose in waves, making the air shimmer. Tom felt like he'd stepped into a mouth. Inside the boarding house, the stew smell was thick and tired. A woman behind the counter didn't meet their eyes. Her hands trembled as she slid a key across the wood. She whispered, barely audible, "Don't make noise after the bell." Tom leaned close to Elias. "This is a trap." Elias took the key without looking at the woman. "Yes," he murmured. "Then why?" "Because if we run," Elias said, "they chase. If we stay, they show how." Upstairs, the room was small. The window was nailed shut. The bed smelled like men who hadn't left. Tom checked the door, checked the floor, checked the wall like a hunted animal looking for the thin part of a cage. Elias sat carefully. Old pain making sitting into math. He loosened the bandage at his side just enough to breathe, then tightened it again. Tom pretended not to see the red seeping through. Tom's voice was tight. "We leave now." Elias shook his head once. "We wait," he said. Tom stared. "For what?" Elias's eyes lifted to the ceiling. "For the bell," he answered. It rang an hour later. Not a church bell. A foundry bell, low, brutal, a sound that didn't call men to worship. It called them to obey. Tom's muscles went rigid. "Now!" Elias stood, shovel in hand. "Now!" he agreed. They reached the door. A lock clicked from the outside. Tom grabbed the handle and yanked. It didn't budge. Chains slid across the hallway, tightening, sealing the corridor like a throat closing. Holt Varrow's voice floated up the stairwell, smooth as hot oil. "Mr. Ward," he called. "Your boy's name still isn't on my paper." Tom's grip tightened on his rifle. "I'll put a hole in you." Varrow's laugh was soft. "You'll try," he replied. "But I don't need to win a duel. I need to win your boy." The door frame splintered. 3 foundry hands slammed into the room. Soot scarves, heavy gloves, hooks, chains. One swung a chain low for Tom's knees. Tom jumped, but the chain clipped him, stealing his balance. He hit the floor hard, breath knocked out. A hook descended toward Tom's neck. Elias moved like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for this shape of violence. The shovel came down flat, not cutting, but slamming into the attacker's forearm hard enough to make the hook clatter away. Another man lunged for Elias with a hammer. Elias stepped in, took the hammer's line, and drove the shovel handle into the man's chest. The man staggered back into the wall, coughing. Tom rolled under the window and came up on his feet, grabbing the bed frame and yanking it sideways. A hook snagged the mattress instead of flesh. Tom shoved the bed into a second attacker, pinning him long enough to slip past. A fourth man appeared in the doorway, pistol raised, one-handed, careless. Elias didn't shoot first. He threw the shovel blade hard into the wall beside the man's head. The metal thudded and stuck, close enough to make the shooter flinch like death had whispered his name. That flinch was everything. Tom surged forward and slammed his shoulder into the man's ribs, driving him backward into the hall. The pistol fired into the ceiling, blasting plaster down the stairwell like snow. Below, boots pounded. Men shouted. The whole building woke up like a beast. Elias ripped the shovel free. "Out!" he hissed. They ran into the hallway and nearly collided with a man holding a chain like a noose. Tom raised his rifle. Elias grabbed Tom's barrel and shoved it down. "No!" Elias snapped. "Not here!" His eyes flicked to the thin walls, the crowded stairs. "One spark, and the whole town blames you for the fire." Tom swallowed his anger and moved. They burst through the back door into an alley that smelled like coal and hot slag. The air was thick. The heat made breathing feel like swallowing metal. Shots cracked behind them, wild, impatient. Bullets slapped brick and stone, sparks flashing in the gloom. Tom didn't fire back. He ran because Elias ran, and that meant the old man had already chosen the ground. They tore past stacked ore carts and iron rails that cut the earth like scars. Above them, a catwalk crossed between buildings, lanterns swinging on chains making shadows jump. A metal screech ripped the air. A cart gate swung open ahead. Men spilled out, more foundry hands, blocking the alley like a closing mouth. Elias stopped long enough to read the scene, then grabbed Tom and shoved him into a narrow gap between two ore carts. "Down," Elias hissed. Tom dropped. Elias yanked the brake lever on the nearest cart, hard. The cart lurched. A chain snapped loose, and the ore cart rolled forward on its own weight, slamming into the line of men with a brutal clang that knocked them backward into each other like dominoes. No blood, just bodies and breath stolen. Tom stared. "You planned that?" Elias coughed. "I read it," he rasped. They moved deeper into Ashbarrow's industrial belly, where the glow grew redder and the roar louder. The foundry loomed ahead, wide doors, open vents breathing firelight. Tom's voice came tight. "They're pushing us toward the furnaces." "Heat makes people panic," Elias said. "Panic makes mistakes." A shot cracked from above. Splinters jumped off the ore cart beside Tom's head. He looked up and saw a silhouette on the catwalk. Rifle braced, calm. Not a worker, a watcher. Tom's voice went low. "Sniper." Elias's gaze narrowed. "Not Varrow," he muttered. "Bigger." Another shot snapped, forcing them into the foundry doorway. Inside, the world was noise and fire. Hammers rang, chains clanked. The furnace mouth glowed like sunrise trapped in a cage. Sparks fell like burning insects. And men waited, not just laborers, armed men in clean gloves, masks over their mouths, eyes cold. Varrow's real crew. Holt Varrow stepped out from behind stacked ingots, scarf still clean, smiling like he'd already won. "You see?" he called over the roar. "This town keeps moving because I keep it moving." Tom raised his rifle. "Let us go." Varrow laughed. "Go where?" he asked. "The trail ends here." Then he snapped his fingers. Two men lunged from Tom's blind side with a weighted net, chain-linked, heavy. Tom tried to dodge. A third man slammed a hammer handle into Tom's ribs. The breath left him in one ugly burst. The net dropped over him and locked him down like a promise. "Tom!" Elias barked, stepping forward. Varrow lifted a pistol and aimed it not at Elias's chest, at Tom's head. "Easy," Varrow warned. "You move wrong, the boy stops being valuable." Elias froze. Varrow's smile softened into something crueler. "That's it," he said gently. "That's what they wanted to see. The mountain stops moving when the right stone is threatened." Tom strained under the net. A boot crushed his shoulder back down. Elias's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" he asked. Varrow stepped close enough for Elias to smell the heat baked into his clothes. "I want you to leave," he said. "And I want the boy to stay." His eyes glittered. "He's young. He learns fast. He'll make good labor." Tom snarled through pain. "Go to hell," Varrow smiled. "We already live in it," he replied. Then he lowered his voice. "And if you don't leave, Gravedigger, I don't brand him, I close him." He pulled a brass coin from his pocket. Crescent-bit missing. He flipped it once. It caught furnace light and looked like it was made of blood. Elias's eyes stayed locked on it. Varrow leaned in. "You've been following a mark you don't understand," he whispered. "Now you'll understand it from the inside." He nodded, and men dragged Tom, still netted, through a side door toward the deeper belly of the foundry. Tom's eyes met Elias's. Not a plea, a warning. "Don't." Elias answered without words. He lowered his hands slowly. "Fine," he said. "Let him go to labor. I'll leave." Varrow's smile widened, satisfied. "Wise," he said. "Old men should know when the fire is too hot." Elias turned away, one step, then another, escorted by two men with pistols low but ready. Tom watched helplessly as they dragged him down a corridor and the door slammed. The foundry swallowed him. Elias walked out into the yard as if he'd surrendered. Then, as soon as the escort's eyes shifted, just a heartbeat, Elias moved. He drove his elbow into the nearer man's ribs, stole his breath, and took his pistol wrist, twisting it down. The gun clattered to the ground. Elias didn't pick it up. He picked up a long iron pry bar leaning against the wall. Because Elias didn't need a gun to kill a plan. He needed a tool. He slipped behind stacked ingots and moved along the foundry's outer edge, following the direction they dragged Tom. Every step hurt. The wound in his side was a voice now. But Elias had lived long enough to know pain was information, not a command. At the back of the yard, a slag heap rose black and glassy, piled like cooled lava. Men were digging there under lantern light, heads down. Not miners, prisoners. A supervisor stood over them with a chain, letting it clink so they remembered it could bite. Elias stepped closer, silent. He saw a pit cut into the slag, freshly dug, not for ore, for bodies. He climbed down and plunged his shovel into the heap, digging fast, controlled, because this is what he was born to do, and because the earth always tells the truth if you ask it right. On the third thrust, the shovel struck metal with a dull clink. Elias dug with his hands, ripping aside ash and hardened slag. He pulled free an oilcloth-wrapped object, not a corpse, a mold, a coin mold. He opened it, and furnace light caught the inside. A crescent-bit cavity shaped with precise cruelty, perfect for stamping brass into that same signature. So the coin wasn't traveling by accident. It was being made here. Elias's stomach went cold. Red Hollow, Crescent Ford, Gallows Glen. All of it wasn't a string of towns. It was a system. Behind him, a voice spoke softly. "You shouldn't touch that." Elias turned. Holt Varrow stood a few paces away, scarf still clean, pistol in hand. The smile was gone now. "You're stubborn," Varrow said, "and you're bleeding. That makes you predictable." Elias held the mold like evidence and the shovel like judgment. "Where's the boy?" he asked. Varrow's eyes gleamed. "Down in the duct," he said. "They're fitting him for the mark." Elias's chest tightened. Not fear, pressure, like a grave closing. Varrow lifted his pistol. "You could have walked away," he said. "You could have lived your legend quietly." Elias's voice stayed calm. "Quiet is how you bury crimes," he replied. Varrow's mouth twisted. "Then dig," he said. "Dig until you find him." He stepped closer. "But understand, if you reach him, you reach the furnace too. And furnaces don't care who's right." He fired. The bullet snapped into slag near Elias's boot, showering black shards. Elias dropped behind the heap, then moved, low, into shadow. He slid the mold into his coat, then sprinted toward a hatch door that breathed hotter air. Varrow shouted. Men surged, boots pounding, chains clinking. Elias yanked open the hatch. Heat punched him in the face like a fist. He went down anyway. The duct was a narrow metal corridor running alongside the furnace belly. The air shimmered. Every breath tasted like pennies. The walls vibrated with the roar of fire. Voices echoed ahead. Tom's voice, strained, and a man's laughter. Elias moved fast until the corridor lowered and forced him to crawl. The wound in his side screamed. Elias ignored it. He'd heard worse voices. Then he saw them. Tom was strapped upright against a metal post, wrists bound, chest heaving. A man in thick gloves held a crescent-shaped branding iron in a bed of coals, the metal glowing orange like a piece of sunset stolen and sharpened. Tom's jaw clenched. He didn't beg. Holt Varrow stood nearby, watching like this was a ceremony. "Last chance," Varrow said to Tom. "Say the words. Say you belong. And the mark becomes mercy." Tom spit into the grit. "You can't own me," he rasped. Varrow sighed like disappointed teacher. Then you'll learn what ownership feels like. He nodded. The gloved man lifted the glowing iron. Elias stepped out of the shadow. Put it down, Elias said. Varrow turned, eyes widening. Surprise, then anger. You're a persistent disease, he snarled. Elias's voice didn't rise. And you're a coward with clean cloth, he replied. The branding iron swung toward Tom's arm. Elias surged forward and slammed the pry bar into the iron hand's wrist. The branding iron flew, clanging against metal and skittering toward the furnace vent. The gloved man screamed, clutching his wrist. Varrow raised his pistol and fired. The shot screamed past Elias's shoulder and hit the duct wall, sparks flashing. In the tight corridor, the echo hit like thunder. Tom twisted against his bonds, trying to free a hand, teeth bared. Elias ducked behind the post, breathing hard. "Tom!" he rasped. "Can you move your hands?" Tom strained. "No! Rope's tied behind—" Elias's eyes scanned the post. Bolts, a latch, a chain looped to a floor ring. Elias grabbed the shovel, still strapped across his back, and drove the blade into the floor ring like a wedge. He levered hard. Metal squealed. Varrow fired again. The bullet sparked off the shovel blade, screaming into the ceiling. Elias didn't flinch. He forced the ring up until it tore loose with a snapping groan. Tom's binding slackened. Tom ripped one wrist free, then the other, gasping. Varrow shouted, "Kill him!" Two men crowded the duct entrance, rifles up. In the cramped heat, they couldn't aim cleanly. That didn't stop them from firing. Bullets tore into the duct walls, ricochets whining like angry insects. Elias grabbed Tom and shoved him down. "Crawl!" Elias snapped. Tom crawled, dragging himself toward a side vent where cooler air seeped in. Elias turned toward the furnace controls, valves and levers marked with soot-stained symbols. He'd seen systems. He'd dug up systems. They all had one thing in common. They depended on men believing they couldn't be touched. Elias grabbed a lever and yanked. A blast of hot air roared through the duct like a dragon exhaling. Smoke and ash surged, blinding everyone who wasn't ready. Men screamed. Someone dropped a rifle. Another man staggered back, coughing until he vomited. Varrow stumbled, eyes watering, scarf finally dirtied by his own fire. "You idiot!" Varrow choked. "You'll burn us all!" Elias's voice cut through the roar. "That's what you're afraid of!" he rasped. "Not death! Witnesses!" Tom coughed, eyes burning, but he moved fast now. He grabbed the fallen rifle, then used its butt to smash the duct latch and open a side hatch. Cooler air hit them like mercy. They spilled out into a maintenance corridor that ran alongside the furnace wall, pipes sweating, rivets humming. Behind them, Varrow's men stumbled in smoke, shouting, firing blind. Elias led Tom toward a ladder. "Up," he ordered. Tom grabbed Elias's elbow. "Your side—" "Later," Elias snapped. "Move." They climbed to a catwalk above the foundry floor. From up here, Ashbarrow looked like a living beast. Men running, fire roaring, chains swinging. Varrow burst from the smoke below and shouted up at them, rage cracking his voice. "You can't leave!" he screamed. "You don't get to carry my mark out of my town!" Tom raised the rifle and aimed steady at Varrow's shoulder. Not his head, not his heart. Elias's hand stopped him. "No," he said, breath tight. "Not yet." Tom's eyes flashed. "He'll keep doing it." Elias's gaze locked on Varrow. "He's not the hand," Elias said. "He's the glove." Varrow's men climbed ladders toward them. The catwalk shook with their weight. Elias spotted a chain hoist above a stack of ingots. He moved to it, braced his shoulder, and yanked the release pin. The hoist screamed. The chain snapped tight, and a massive hook swung like a pendulum across the catwalk. It slammed into the climbing men, knocking two off the ladder into a pile of coal sacks below. They hit hard, rolling, alive but broken in spirit. Tom stared at Elias. "You're using the whole place." Elias coughed, blood tasting copper. "Tools," he rasped. "It's all tools." They ran along the catwalk toward the far exit where a side stairwell led down to the yard. Below, workers scattered, yelling about smoke, about heat, about the bell. Then the sniper fired again. A bullet cracked into the catwalk railing inches from Tom's hand. Tom flinched, eyes snapping to the far chimney platform. A silhouette stood there with a long rifle, calm, distant, watching, not chasing, judging. Elias saw it too, and his face went colder than the iron around them. "That's the one," Elias murmured. "Not the hand, the eyes." The sniper didn't shoot again. He simply watched them run, as if he wanted them to escape, as if escape was part of the plan. They hit the stairwell and raced down into the yard, smoke thickening. Men shouted, "Fire!" and "Close the vents!" and "Where's Varrow?" Tom grabbed Elias's arm. "We have the mold," Tom panted. "We can prove it." Elias nodded, but his breath hitched, pain catching up like a debt. They reached the back gate and found it barred by two men with chains. One raised a pistol. Tom fired once into the chain link, snapping it where it anchored the bar. The bar dropped. The gate swung open. They ran into the night. Behind them, Ashbarrow roared. Alarms, bells, men screaming, fire coughing smoke into the sky. They didn't stop until the heat glow behind them shrank into a red smear on the horizon. On a ridge above the town, Elias finally dropped to one knee, coughing hard. Tom knelt beside him. "Let me see!" Elias waved him off, but weaker now. "Not now," he rasped. Tom's voice shook. "You're bleeding again." Elias's eyes stayed on the distance, where the sniper's platform was just a dark line against the sky. "They wanted me in the furnace," Elias whispered, "to see if I'd burn." Tom swallowed. "And?" Elias looked at him, tired, fierce, real. "And you didn't get branded," he said. "That's the win." Tom pulled the oilcloth-wrapped mold from Elias's coat and held it in both hands like it weighed more than metal. "This is where the coins come from," Tom said. Elias nodded once. "Now we know the source," he said. "And that means they'll stop playing small." As if to prove him right, something glinted on the trail ahead. A stake, fresh wood, fresh cloth. Pinned to it was not a coin. A crescent-shaped branding iron head, cold and blackened like a trophy, and beneath it, a scrap of paper written in clean, careful ink, "Bring the shovel." Tom's voice went thin. "They want you." Elias's jaw tightened. "They always did," he said. Then he pushed himself up, slow, stubborn, like the earth itself had to fight to keep him down. Tom looked at the paper, at the brand, at the mold, at the blood on Elias's bandage. "What do we do?" Tom asked. Elias lifted his shovel, the handle dark against the starlight. "We keep digging," he said, "until the man behind the mark runs out of places to hide." And now, here's the question for you, because Ashbarrow just proved the trail is deliberate, and the next trap is already waiting. If someone could lure you town by town, forcing you to bleed for the people you protect, would you keep walking, knowing the next fire might not let you come out?